Nike is the most well-known and largest sportswear corporation in the world. One man's ambition of better shoes grew into a worldwide enterprise worth more than $100 billion in just over 50 years. Today, we'll take a look back at Nike's early days to see how the magic happened and what the components were for their success. But first, please accept my warmest greetings if this is your first video at the Smart Stocks Academy channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell next to it to be the first to know when a new video like this is produced. So if you're ready to talk about Nike, let's get to the video. Phil Knight graduated from Stanford in 1962, and as any business graduate can tell you, it is impossible to become an entrepreneur if you don't have any strong ideas. But Phil did have an idea. He was a distance runner in the university and had produced a paper in one of his business classes suggesting the following notion. Phil had observed how Japanese cameras had displaced German cameras as the market leader in the United States, and he wondered whether Japanese shoes might do the same to Puma and Adidas, which were at the same time immensely popular in the United States. By the way, Adidas is pronounced just like that. But let's get back to Phil. Phil got fascinated with his notion of importing Japanese shoes to the United States after finishing that paper and graduating. Of course, he didn't possess any Japanese running shoes, and the few he had seen had been bought through the United States by soldiers stationed in Japan during the occupation following World War II. However, Phil's lack of exposure simply served to confirm that he had stumbled across a fantastic opportunity. He realized that in order to take advantage of it, he would have to make contact with a Japanese firm and negotiate the import of their goods into the United States, both of which he had no prior expertise with. But as befitting the guy who would eventually found Nike, he went ahead and did it anyhow. He flew to Japan as a tourist in November 1962 and immediately began exploring. He came into a shoe store in the lovely city of Kobe that piqued his interest. It belonged to a firm named Onitsuka Tiger, and the shoes they created were of such great quality that Phil was eager to bring them back to the United States. He pretended to be an American shoe distributor and set up a meeting with the founder of the firm. Phil made up a company name on the fly and volunteered to become Onitsuka's American distributor, a suggestion that the owner, to his astonishment, accepted. Phil had become the only distributor for Onitsuka Tiger in the United States based solely on his confidence. So in 1963, he received his first supply of Tiger shoes and began selling them out of the trunk of his car at any running track he could get to. His method was clearly unscalable, so he turned to the one person he knew who knew more about shoes than he did, Bill Bowerman, his old coach at the University of Oregon. Bill was certainly one of America's most well-known instructors at that time, having taught many Olympic athletes. He was so taken with the Tiger sneakers that he wanted to team up with them. So as a result, Bill and Phil formed Blue Ribbon Sports in January 1964, each contributing $500. They spent it all on their first purchase, which consisted of 300 pairs of shoes for $3.33 each. Their cargo arrived in April 1964, and it was sold out by July owing to Bill's contacts. BRS sold $8,000 worth of shoes in their first year, and Phil used that money to hire salespeople for his firm. Their sales had climbed to $20,000 by 1965. They quickly launched their own store in Santa Monica. However, although Phil was in charge of the commercial side of things, Phil was the one who was actually innovating. He was the man who single-handedly introduced jogging to the United States. In 1966, he published a book on it that went to sell over 1 million copies, and his business was among the first to produce Tiger jogging shoes. Bowerman was passionate about innovation, and with each new shipment from Onitsuka, he'd split apart a few shoes to examine how they were produced, and he would constantly strive to enhance them by adding more cushion or using lighter materials, for example. He was practically creating Onitsuka shoes for them, as he was continually sending comments to Japan seeking improvements. One of Bill's designs propelled BRS into the mainstream. The Cortez, as he dubbed it, became one of the best-selling shoes in 1968, owing in part to the 1968 Olympics, which was hosted in Mexico. And then in 1969, BRS sold $300,000 worth of shoes thanks to the Cortez. However, they had a major issue. The Cortez was so popular that they couldn't keep up with the demand. Every fresh supply they got sold out quicker than the last, but Onitsuka continued to send them at a glacial rate. Onitsuka was really attempting to meet local demand in Japan first, and then shipping the remainder to America. Phil and Bill realized that in order to grow, they would have to go beyond being a basic distributor. Then they realized they had all the cards. The Cortez was Bowerman's design, so whenever their contract with Onitsuka expired, they could start building it for themselves. Fortunately for them, their contract would expire in 1972, just in time for the Munich Olympics. As a result, Phil had plenty of time to plan his major move. He began working on the branding in 1971, and his first employee offered the name Nike after the Greek goddess of triumph. Then Phil realized he needed a logo, so he drove to a neighboring university and grabbed the first graphic design student he could find, instructing her to create one for him. He received the swoosh for the princely amount of $35. In retrospect, that was money well spent, and Phil was ready for the Olympics now that his branding was complete. This time, instead of entering into exclusive agreements, Phil built a network of subcontractors across Japan this time. Phil could finally expand his wings now that he was in charge of production. You can see exactly when Phil began importing shoes from his Japanese subcontractors in this graph of Nike sales. And sure, he began before his contract had even ended in 1971. Nike's narrative became one of progress from then on. They became America's largest sportswear business in 1989, thanks to the clever marketing such as the Just Do It campaign and the recruitment of rookie players who would go on to become world famous. The rise of Nike is every bit as fascinating as Phil Knight's early days. But don't take my word for it. In 2016, Phil Knight released his book, Shoe Dog, a memoir by the creator of Nike, Phil Knight. Phil goes into far more depth in his book than I could ever go to in this video. So if you like the narrative thus far, please share it and consider subscribing and putting on the notification bell if you haven't already, to be the first to know when a new video like this is uploaded. And with that, the video for today comes to a close. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch. Hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you real soon.